Alright, welcome back. Just continuing with our Witchwood spoiler thing, getting into like the bulk of the cards now. So we're gonna do it a class at a time, starting with Druid, as evidenced by the title of the video, probably. So starting off with kind of a clunker, I think Witchwood Apple. Now you'll note that I said to keep an open mind about things in the introduction if you bothered to watch that. This card seems really bad to me. This card seems really bad. This kind of goes in like a fill the board with dudes style of Druid that we've seen before, but the trends are 2/2. So it's 8 mana over time, which there's something to be said for being able to split it into chunks. Like you do like Apple and then a 2/2 next turn, and then 2/2/2s on turn 4. And that's like not the worst thing in the universe. It's not as bad as 8 mana 3 2/2s. Okay, it's a lot better than that, but it's a lot worse than what fast Druid decks have done and are doing right now. Like you can just go slap together a token Druid that's way better than that, right? I don't know. It seems way too slow, way too weak for what it's doing. And then if you do just compare it like late game, it's like 8 mana 3 2/2s versus 5 mana 7 2/2s. So it's like one is a little bit better. Now you could put both in the deck, but now you've got more clunky cards that you can't play immediately on turn, like 1, 2, 3. And that's going to be bad. So it seems bad. One note in its favor, people are talking about like hand Druid as a thing, which obviously, I mean, they're pushing, as we'll see as we go more into detail in the Druid cards. So you can play Witchwood Apple on turn 2, and that'll get you in line to play Mountain Giant on turn 4, and Mountain Giant on turn 4 is really good. But there's some things to note here, okay? Like, Mountain Giant on turn 4 hasn't been enough to make Handlock a deck for a long time, okay? Cube Locks are playing Mountain Giants, but that's kind of because why not? If Mountain Giant weren't in the deck, it would still be Cube Lock. Before Cube Lock, we still had Mountain Giants, and people weren't really doing it because it's just not quite as impactful as that used to be back in the day when it was like a game-winning strategy. Also, that's a one card, like, this is just a good card in your deck for Warlock. For Druid, it's a 2-card combo, and also, you're not drawing. So in Warlock, you need 1 card, and you're drawing with your hero power to find that card more consistently on turn 4. Whereas in Druid, you're not drawing, and you have to find 2 cards. And one of them has to be played on turn 2 or 3, I guess turn 1 with the coin. Basically, you have to play the apple before it gets to turn 4, in addition to finding the giant without drawing for it. So that seems... It just doesn't seem like it's worth building around, because that's not going to happen consistently enough to build your deck around. So I don't think Witchwood Apple... I don't see it being very good. I could be wrong about this card, but I don't see this being very good. Druid of the Scythe. So this is a Tentacle. 3 mana 2/4 taunt that can be a 4/2 rush is how I'd look at it. So Tentacle was like the... What do I want to say? It's like the weakest possible vanilla 3-drop taunt that can still see play. People played Tentacle in like Hand Buff Paladin for a while, which was itself a fringe deck. It was bad in the deck. Like it was one of the worst cards in the deck, but it wasn't so offensively bad that you couldn't run it. So that's where we're at as the baseline, and then our upside is that it can be a 4/2 rush, which is interesting because a lot of the reason that a 2/4 taunt is bad is because it's so not even reactive. It's so, like, it lets your opponent, you play it, and then your opponent can react to it and, like, value trade and just kind of I don't know, they're very slow and clunky in a lot of situations and not very impactful. This allows you to run a tentacle, but also have it sometimes be a very fast removal card, a 4/2 rush. It's probably going to die into whatever it trades to. And I guess sometimes you can just play it like on an empty board. Maybe they're at like 5 life and you can set up lethal that way for next turn or something. So being able to play it as a 4/2 is valued that way. But I think mostly it's so that it can be a removal spell, essentially, when a 2/4 taunt would just be too passive. Do I think that makes the card good? Not necessarily. It's just not bad. It's not bad, and it's okay. I think the main argument for this card not being that great is you'd want to play it in like a somewhat slower deck. Like I don't think. Actually, I don't know. Does this go in Token Druid? I don't think this would go in a Token Druid. I don't think it's worth putting into that kind of deck. So it's probably a slower thing. And then you want to play Oaken Summons if you're playing a slower deck. Oaken Summonsing out a 2/2 is really bad. It could be a 3/6 taunt. So I think the card is probably okay. And it might see play in some deck eventually. It's just not a standout hit. Ferocious Howl is basically Shields block. It's better if you've already like had your big ultimate infestation turn, and it's way worse if you're trying to find your ultimate infestation. So if you have a deck that you just want more cycle and do more armor, then this is probably pretty great half the time and pretty mediocre half the time. It's a solid card. It'll probably see use somewhere. It's not a standout. It's better than Druid at Scythe, but like it's pretty okay. Like 3 mana, draw a card, gain 8 armor, or something. That's good. It's hard to complain with that, right? Witching Hour is exciting though. This is our first really exciting card for Druid. Witching Hour is basically Resurrect, but so the issue, Resurrect took a really long time to catch on. There's a little bit of history here. Resurrect came out and was not immediately like a smash hit. It took a long time for what people call Big Priest, which is a dumb name. Resurrect Priest, I'm going to call it, to really catch on. Because it needed that critical mass of cards that could bring things back and cheat things into play to come together for it to be an archetype. The issue with it being that you could only play minions you'd wanted to bring back. If you played it, like in early attempts at using it, you'd bring back like your cleric or something a lot of the time, and that's just not... It wouldn't be what you wanted. You're trying to get like a 4/7 and you get a 1/3, and you're sad. Bringing back beasts specifically, just any sort of... It doesn't have to be beasts, it is in this case, but just narrowing the effect to where it only hits a specific type of minion gives you a lot of control over what you're bringing back, which makes this card instantly amazing with no other support. You just only put in beasts that you would want to resurrect for 3 mana, and then it's always good every time you cast it. Like off the top of my head, you've got Druid of the Claw in either form would be really good. You have the new Grizzly that we'll get to way later. But the new Grizzly is good. Spoilers. Card's fucking great, and a 3 mana 3/12 Twant's good. Yeah, Witching Hour is going to be fantastic. I don't know if it's going to like revolutionize things immediately, but the card 100% is going to see play somewhere. Okay, Forest Guide. I don't know, some people are kind of excited about this card. I'm kind of on the fence about it. The idea... So there's 2 ways you look at this. 1, Mill Druid, and 2, Aggro Druid Refill. So 1, Mill Druid does not work in Standard because we're losing Oracles, and really like any way... You're losing Idle, and you're losing really any way to like accelerate the game. You have Naturalizes and stuff. Mill Druid in Wild could actually be really good, because you have... you know, your Death Lords and Oracles and all kinds of things to speed up the game. and fatigue them faster than you. I guess you don't have to fatigue at all since Jade Idol, but you know what I mean. And Forest Guide works in that if you can get it to stick, it just speeds up the game. The longer it's on the board, the sooner you get to the end of the game, and the more cards you're probably going to burn along the way. The issue is that you don't typically run a lot of minions in Mill Druid decks. You run lots of board clears and stuff, so it's kind of hard to stick a Forest Guide for more than a turn. I mean, it's a 1/6. It's going to get killed if they can attack into it, like with anything. So, I don't know. It seems worse than Grove Tender, which is the 3-mana 2/4, everybody can draw a card. And Grove Tender, I don't think makes a lot of Mill Druid lists anyways. So, I don't see it being very good there. And then as an aggro like refill, you're playing a 4-mana 1/6. Jeeves is really good, but Jeeves draws you 3 cards, not your opponent. Jeeves doesn't give your opponent any cards immediately, and it gives you 3 cards immediately. Granted, it's a 1/4. So for 2 extra health, you only get 1 card, but you always get that card. But then your opponent also gets a card, and they get to act first with that card, which can be like another board clear, removal, big taunt, healing, whatever they need to stabilize. Because that's the big aggro like conundrum, is how do I kill them before they're allowed to play their own cards? How do I kill them before they find what's in their deck that allows them to not be dead, and then they're just going to beat the shit out of me because all my shit's dinky and they've got big stuff in their deck. I don't see Forest Guide working too well in that regard. I could be wrong because Jeeves still sees play in aggressive decks, particularly like aggro druids and wild. So if this is good in that role, then maybe it's fine. And like, I mean, it is a lot of health. So if they can't trade it, like if you already have a lot of stuff out, just playing a big health minion that's not going to get cleared, and then you can buff it up with other stuff. I don't know. Seems bad. It seems bad, but this is one of those cards that could do something. Whispering Woods is... I think it's bad also. I don't know. It's like... You want this in an aggressive deck, and an aggressive deck's going to drop their hand unless you're playing Witchwood Apple, in which case you're playing a bad aggressive deck, remember? So... You're not going to have that many cards. If you do have that many cards, then you get a lot of 1/1s, but you're probably not as well equipped to use them because you haven't been playing cards. Your opponent's probably got the board. It's like, what deck would hold a lot of cards and also utilize a board of 1/1s to be threatening? I can't really think of one. You could run like all the AoE buffs and then just Whispering Woods and like card draw and make 7 1/1s, and then if they stick, you make them really big and swing. But is that really better than just playing minions the entire game and then buffing those? I don't think so. So I can't see this one being good, but it's like if it routinely can hit like 3 or 4 wisps on turn 4, it might be okay. It might be okay. I might be being too hard on it. If it can consistent, like the big dream is like, how do you hit 7? But if you're just hitting 3 or 4, it's not the worst in the world. It's not good either. Like that's worse than Call to Arms, Muster for Battle, that kind of stuff. I don't know. Druid is well positioned to use their tokens. That should be noted. If you have 1/1s as an aggressive Druid, that's scary because those can actually push a lot of damage very quickly. But I don't know, not too hopeful. Bewitched Guardian's very interesting. It's basically Twilight Drake for 1 more, and it has Taunt. Twilight Drake is so even in like Control Warlocks don't even play Twilight Drakes anymore. The class that always has a full hand doesn't always play Twilight Drake. And It's worth noting that Spellbreaker is in almost every deck. So even if this card is excellent, everyone's running a hard counter to it. I'm not entirely convinced it is excellent though, because it's, well, I don't know. It could be good. It's like it's like, okay, so let's say you play it only after like an ultimate infestation or something. So you like infest, and then next turn you play a 5 mana for what's this going to be, like a 4/9, 4/10? You probably had right about 10 cards, like a 5 mana 4/10 taunt that you can't play earlier in the game. That's pretty good, but Druid already has lots of big taunt minion options, and they don't get as countered by silence. Like, I normally really hate the argument that if a card can be silenced and becomes bad, then it's just a terrible card. I don't think that's true, but I think in this particular case, in this particular meta, it might be a valid concern. This card could eventually be very good. It could have its moments, and it might be better than I'm making it out to be right now. So I would give that one like a maybe. It's I mean, it's well designed. It's balanced. It's just, it's hard to see where it fits in. Duskfallen Aviana, talking about hard to see where it fits in. So if you play this card, you run a good risk of losing the game. If you like play this card and then just pass, you might have just died. Because your opponent gets to go first. It's like, oh, I get to play a card for free. But now imagine you're sitting on the other side of the table and your opponent says, hey, you get to play a card for free. Like, you know that feeling? You were like, ooh, free card. Imagine you can have that feeling for no mana and for no cards invested. That's the position you're putting your opponent in. So don't look like at how exciting that text box is. Look at how exciting it is for the first person to get to use it who didn't even have to invest in it. So they get to play their biggest, like they get a huge tempo swing. They can play their biggest thing for free, probably while removing it. It's only a 3/7, so you need to play it like on a naked board, and even then they might have removal. Even if it's like expensive hard removal, they can play that for free and then just develop normally. And I don't know. There's a lot of ways this card can go wrong. That being said, if you can figure out a way to have this in play without having played it, then you might be onto something. So immediately what comes to mind, you have Alarmobot, right? Innocuous little 0/3 mech that we haven't seen much of, but used to be quite a meme back in the day. Alarmobot can pull this down, and then you can just have 0 mana ultimate infestation, and then you win the game. You also have Cube, so you play Aviana, and then you cube it, and then you trigger the cube on your turn somehow on your next turn without playing a card. If you can set that up to work, that could be like I don't know how you do this. I honestly don't know how you do it, but if you can figure out how to do it, then we have a new combo Druid. Like that's all it is. If you can figure out how to get it into play without playing it, then you have a deck. But if you can't figure out how to do that, then it's garbage. So it's a really cool card. I love this card. I love especially legendaries like this, where it's just like crazy effects, and it's like, I don't know what to do with that. Very cool. But only time will say if it's actually good. It's going to take a lot of people trying a lot of stuff to really crack that one, I think. Gloom Stag, when this card was spoiled, I thought it was amazing. Like when they first showed it, I was like, holy shit, 5 mana 4/8 taunt. 5 mana 4/8 taunt. That is crazy. And then you look at Druid of the Claw. Druid of the Claw is a 5 mana 4/6 taunt. That's only 2 less health. So it is worse. The difference between a 4/6 and a 4/8 is significant. Don't get me wrong. That matters. But sometimes Druid the Claw is also a 4/4 charger. And that also matters. That alone almost makes... Like, I think even if this were always a 4/8, I might run Druid of the Claw over it. You could run them both, sure. But then you also have to look at the downsides. You can't play Wild Growth, Wrath, Swipe, Spreading Plague, Ultimate Infestation, like we talked about before. Not even close to worth it. Not even close to worth it. Yeah, it just don't... This card's terrible. This card just seems absolutely terrible. I don't know what they were thinking. This needed to be pushed like way, way harder than this to make Odd Druid a thing. They correctly identified that Odd Druid is a hard sell. What they did not do is actually sell it. They're like, oh, we'll throw in a Gloom Stag. No. Just don't. It's bad. It's really bad. This might actually be the worst card in the entire set. Actually, yeah, no, I'm just going to say Gloom Stag is the worst card in the entire set. I'm calling it now. I will call it right now. This card is complete trash. That being said, in the far, far distant future in Wild, like 5 years down the road, there might be enough odd cards that make this good. Okay? Is that fair? In the future, with enough cards, this could be good. But at the moment, complete trash. Splintergraft is really cool. Really cool. Unfortunately, not... Like, this is another one of those, like, what do I do with this cards? Except this one's not quite as exciting. You get to make a 10/10 out of anything. Which means any effect on a dude, you can scale it up to being on a 10/10. Which is really cool. And there's, like, a lot you can do with that. But, like, what... I don't know. There's a lot you can do with that. You can do it on, like, a boar. So you can have a 10/10 charger. You can do it on a stealth minion, like a Worgen. I think the main thing... You want to look at, like, 2 or less cost so that you can play them in the same turn. I think that's kind of the key. So, like, Worgen Infiltrator, cheap stealth. So you can have a 10/10 stealth for 10. That's pretty good. You know, I wouldn't be mad about that one. I don't know, you can make a giant lifesteal guy for some reason. You don't really need lifesteal in Druid. You can make a giant taunt. Don't really need that. You can make... I don't know. I think charge and stealth are kind of like the main places you want to go, right? I guess you can make a 10/10 Wind Fury guy and just fucking hope that it sticks. If they don't have an answer, they're probably dead, right? So maybe that's your plan. Like turn 9, I don't even... What's the one drop with Wind Fury? You play that, Splintergraft at turn 10, you play it. Turn 11, if they didn't answer it, you just like silence your way through their taunts or whatever, and then they die. So maybe that's a thing, but you're basically passing on the turn you play Splintergraft. An 8/8 that doesn't do anything else on the turn you play it is really a substantial tempo loss. And I'm not sure the value makes up for it. You're getting another gigantic minion. I don't know. In control games, this card's actually pretty crazy. Now that I think about it, in control games, this card's really crazy. Because there's a lot of times in control you can just... like, it's like the Ren effect, right? Everybody said Ren was going to be bad. But there's a lot of dead turns. For the record, I always had Ren's back, alright? I knew she was going to get the job done. Because you hang a lot of mana in these games. You have a lot of turns where you're not doing anything too impactful, and you can afford to play like big, slow things that eventually do something really good. So maybe as a... I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a cool card. It's just not like... It's very risky. Because against like any aggressive deck, it's just dead. And I feel like Druid can maybe do better things. But it's a very cool card. But yeah, I think I've talked enough about these. That sums up Druid. don't play Gloom Stag, I think is the takeaway point. Don't play Gloom Stag, play Witching Hour.